So, okay, in your own time.
So here we are in the end of winter and we're coming into spring. Or so we may think. We have in Australia an inverted Northern Hemisphere seasonal calendar. So basically the Europeans arrived, they took the season calendar, of course, autumn, winter, spring, summer, and they just turned it upside down. They decided that it would be a good idea to have it starting at the first of a particular month. So the 1st of September, which isn't far away, will be the first day of spring. If you look around, and if you were here yesterday, it was really quite hot. It's a very strange sort of conundrum that we find ourselves in. As an Aboriginal person, I've always found it quite interesting. And regardless of whether you're Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, you could be from any ethnic background. It's all about what you see in the environment, and that's what happens for Aboriginal peoples as well. We've had thousands of years to see what happens from year to year, and all of those things, all of that interconnectedness in the ecosystem, that's what tells us what's going to happen. Are you going to edit this? Because I could just keep talking on and on. Okay, so for most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it's about looking at the environment. And so environmental factors will play a large part in when those seasonal changes do come about. So for instance, at the moment, it is really quite warm and we're coming into the end of what we know as winter. So as an Aboriginal person and as someone who lives in Sydney, a lot of the East Coast down into Victoria, they kind of recognise 5 or 6 seasons depending. So those 6 seasons aren't a set date on the lunar calendar. They are a date, well, not really a date, I suppose. This is going to be very confusing for you, but it is a time when plants and animals and insects, that interconnection, things will start to happen. You'll see birds start to make their nests. You'll see animals out mating, and you'll see flowers starting to bloom, and that will give a much truer indication of what's happening with the temperature and with that seasonal change. So if you go up further north, really there are just 2 seasons, wet season, dry season. But that varies as well, you can have 4, 6, 5, depending on the area. And again, lots of different animals, lots of different plants. If you're in the central desert, way different to down here on the east coast and even the snowy mountains. So it is a really contrasting land, this continent of ours.
So Clarence's observations about Aboriginal seasons are very true, in Sydney especially. Realistically, if you work outside or even spend a lot of time outdoors, you'd know that we don't have any kind of relevance to European seasons here in Sydney. Sydney's climate is quite remarkable, particularly on the coast, particularly here at the Gardens. We've got quite a subtropical microclimate, and it means we can grow an enormous range of plants here. It means that we can have conifers from relatively cool areas sitting right next to fuchsias or begonias from relatively warm areas, sitting next to acacias from Central Australia. In some ways we have to be a bit careful about how we put plants together, but people do remark on it. People do say, this is just astounding. We've never seen the kind of variety that you people can grow outside. We only ever see it in a glass house if we go to a European botanic garden, or we don't see the range of cooler climate plants that can still grow here. How's that, Carla?
Okay, Fran, is it true? Is spring arriving earlier now more than ever because of climate change?
No, not really. Spring's always arrived early in Sydney, Carla. We have no relationship pretty much to the European seasons here in Sydney. We have this funny little sort of season between winter and spring in August where it's warm, it's cold, it's windy, but it starts, you can really pick that it's starting to get warmer. All of our spring flowering flowers start coming out at this time of the year. It's always been thus. I'm sure that if the longer term studies of essentially when things like flowers start blooming, leaves start appearing on trees, birds start nesting, it will show that things are happening slightly earlier, but realistically it's quite imperceptible to us on a smaller time frame, of a few years. If you come from the country like I do, then seasons mean nothing in terms of it's winter or spring. The seasons are more like we've had rain, it's time to sow, or it's, it's dry enough to harvest, or things like that. And I think that really the whole season thing is really just a European construct that it's probably a little bit old now. I don't really think we need to actually cling on to that in Australia anymore.
Okay, and my next question is, why is spring a great time to visit the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney?
Oh, I think spring's just the best time to visit the Botanic Gardens. Generally in spring it's drier, so it's more reliably sunny. Everything's flowering. We have the most gorgeous spring display here, as you know. Our spring walk looks absolutely fabulous. Our acacia bed's looking really, really great. Our herb garden is just overflowing with herbs and flowers, and the whole place is full of scent. It's full of birds. It's full of everything's happening. It really is like new life again after winter. I mean, our winters aren't particularly cold, but I think that a few things still go into hibernation here.
And what do you think are some of the outstanding things that people could look at, apart from, any plants in particular that you would recommend checking out? And
I would check out the camellia garden. It may not be quite so obvious. People tend to think, well, camellias flower in winter. But the camellia garden has a lot of different species of camellias that flower over quite a long period of time. They're quite stunning. They're quite unusual. Compared with the kind of camellias you might, see in a garden or in a nursery. A lot of them have been collected from China and Vietnam in the wild, and in the camellia garden as well was a lot of just beautiful spring flowers. That's one of our more traditional looking gardens. The other one I'd actually recommend people look at is the one that I'm standing right in front of, is this just acacia bank. It's got a whole bunch of different acacias in it from all parts of Australia, which, thanks to the Sydney climate, they seem to do really, really well.
And what are acacias?
Acacias are also called wattles, and of course acacias are known for their Australian green and gold colours.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of what else I can ask. I should ask. Let me think. Spring. Can you think of anything that we need?
Apart
I
from
was going to ask about the garden, like gardening, ideas for the home garden. Is that something that?
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. Okay. So I might ask that. Perfect. Are you ready, Fran?
Yep.
Okay. So, can people get ideas from the Botanic Garden here for their own gardens to plant flowers?
Absolutely. They can also get ideas about design as well. But looking at the combination of plants that we use here, if it grows in the Sydney Botanic Gardens, it will grow in most places in Sydney that don't get frost. If you're living in a frost-prone area, then you need to go to our other gardens and check out what grows there and relate that back to where you're living. But certainly you come to Sydney, you can see the design elements and you can see the plant combinations that we use. And lots of plants have got labels on them, so take notes, take a pen and a piece of paper and write them down. Go to your local nursery, or better still to the Growing Friends nursery right here in the gardens, and ask about, can you get hold of this plant?
So where can people go to? Where did you say here at the gardens?
The Growing Friends nursery. This is one of Sydney's best kept secrets. The Growing Friends, who are part of the Friends of the Botanic Gardens, have the nursery, and they actually grow plants that they've selected from the Botanic Gardens here in Sydney.